The Canberra Raiders and John Bateman will part company at the end of the season after a messy and prolonged contract negotiation ended badly. Tell me, what's your view on how badly this Bateman saga could affect the Raiders' premiership hopes, PK?
Yeah, it could. It just depends on how the Raiders handle it. I think, from what I understand, they've handled it pretty well as a group. They've understood, know the sort of character John Bateman is. I think essentially, Ben, the big thing here is they know how much he wants to win. So there's a feeling that he'll come back this year and he won't be affected in himself about how he competes because he's such a competitor. So I don't think it's really going to affect him too much. Initially I thought it would be, but a couple of phone calls changed that.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. I think they've handled it as best you can given the circumstances, but there's no question they're missing him out on the field. Like, they don't make that grand final last year.
Which is probably why they're going to welcome him back when he does come back.
Edge. Yeah, but aren't there complications with this shoulder surgery that he's had, and we're not sure exactly when it is that he's going to be back? They need him back as quick as they can get him back.
Was he meant to be back by now, or...?
No,
yeah,
initially, but then there were complications and he had to go back in and have it fixed up again.
I reckon he'll be back by, what are we, around 15?
I'm with these guys. I think the bigger issue is that they're missing him on the field. I don't think this whole contract saga, I think it would have been a bigger issue if Canberra had caved in and given him $800,000 a year. That would have caused a bigger issue than the fact they've said, John, you're free to go. Because I think Kenny's right. I think the players know what sort of guy John Bateman is. I don't think it will affect them at all as a playing group. The bigger issue is the fact that you can see their attacks off, and a lot of that I think is because John Bateman's not there, because he was such a weapon for them last year. It was like he had so many dimensions to his game that they don't have this year, and I think that's the bigger issue for the footy club. The contract thing for me is
secondary.
Players move all the time. Players leave clubs all the time.
I just wondered whether or not there was some ill feeling, because you've got to remember this started in grand final week last year, and that doesn't sit well to kind of go to market the way he did.
That's the indication. He came out grand final week, spruiked that he had a clause that he could go and negotiate. Was clearly using grand final week as leverage to get more money. Denied it when it came out, but clearly did say it. Later admitted having that conversation, but it didn't affect them grand final week. The Raiders just knew, to Ricky's point, that's just who he is, moved on, got on with it. Yeah. This year it's basically happened again, and he's now leaving. Unofficially, one of the players has said, Beauty leaves more money for me. That's how they've handled it.
And I'll tell you what has happened again, the Canberra Raiders take a stance on behalf of the game. We'll get into the agents discussion in just a moment, but over the years we've seen Canberra sack players, suspend players, only to see, and very talented players,
Todd Carney, Blake Ferguson, and they were all picked up by other clubs. Josh Dugan had a lot of success at other clubs, but they wanted to stand for something, and they're reaping the rewards now in that they made that grand final. They're in a grand final qualifier in 2016. Not a lot of clubs would be prepared to do that, and it's vindicated by the fact that many other clubs in the NRL, the minute that they're sacked, begin trying to pick those immensely talented players up.
But strong leadership, Ben. That's what they've got. And they've had it. Donny Furner's been there a long time. He's
overseen all that.
He's now the longest serving CEO in the game, and Donny Furner's a man of incredible character, and we've seen with Ricky there, they've just got strong leadership there. It's a lesson for other clubs.
Have you been vindicated? You put out a tweet earlier this year.
You mean him and his shiny head?
Yeah. Or was it cue ball?
Cue ball. There he is.
There he is. You stick the polish in that bald head, big fella.
It's a good head for radio at the best of times, Ben. So I have had it in the Homer Simpson bowling machine, and it's been working overtime. But no, look, I stood by the story at the time. I think the fact that John changed his story or his version of the yarn 3 or 4 times said it all. And that's all there is to say.
Well, that point's now been, the point you made's now been vindicated. That there's a clause there. He later tweeted again when he called the chief executive, Don Furner, a dickhead, that he...
Apparently that was a fake tweet.
Well, I don't believe that. I don't believe that. But anyway, but when he just basically put out, I asked for release once, not 4 times. Well, in the previous one...
Yeah, he changed his story 3 times. At the end of it, what we believed to be the truth at the time has happened.
Yeah.
He was agitating for a release from the grand final of last year, and he's got one. He won't be at Canberra next season.
So the Dragons